Good morning, ladies. So the title of this video is Secret Eating When Nobody Knows But You. I have been a secret eater for as long as I can remember. In fact, I can track back. My mum used to own or run a sweet shop when I was very, very little, and I used to have to go there after school, and it was not a particularly nice environment. I used to have to wait outside until she finished work, and I have real clear memories of how I used to steal sweets from the penny sweet cabinet and put them in my pockets. And as I sat in this little dingy, smelly office, I used to sit there eating the sweets, and I was quite scared, I think. And so I can remember those sweets making me feel better, but equally there was a part of me that got a real kick out of stealing the sweets, and almost if my mum caught me, then I would at least get some of her attention. So I'm talking about this today because it's coming up quite a lot with the clients that I've been working with this week, and we've been talking about and opening up about secret eating, and it comes in many forms. Secret eating, some that are more obvious than others, the sneaking into the kitchen and eating some of the leftovers, or opening the fridge and trying to get some bits out without anybody hearing you. That's the more obvious kinds of secret eating. But also things like stopping at the drive-in on the way home and grabbing something to eat and eating it in the car. The car is a place of sort of almost, although it's very public, isn't it, if you sit and eat in the car, because it's a bit like a fishbowl. There's something about it that almost feels quite safe. And I will often, when I go to Tesco's, I'll sit in the car park and I'll look around and I'll see different people eating in their lunch in their cars, and it just gets me thinking, is that something that they just do regularly, or is there something more sort of secret eating based in it? So it's a really interesting one, secret eating. And I know for me personally, I spent many years in denial about my secret eating, and I also spent many years living on my own, and yet I still know there was an element of secret eating, which sounds bizarre. How can you secretly eat when you live on your own? But there was an element. I knew the difference between if I went to the fridge and had something consciously, as opposed to going to the fridge and almost these little sneaky habits that I'd got in terms of like opening wrappers without making a noise and eating them really quickly behind the fridge door. And even though I lived on my own, I still did things like that, because I do think there was an element of habit in there, but also an element of excitement that it gave me. And if I was feeling a certain way, stressed or angry, that sort of habitual pattern of sneaking the food. And I guess part of that as well is connected to, we have like different aspects of our personality, and we have this part of our personality, what I call the critical parent, which is that really harsh, controlling, finger wagging part of us. And I think within our own sort of psyche, we hide from those parts of ourselves. So our kind of inner child that feels a little bit stressed, the outer child which is the acting out part, that's the part that does the secret eating, almost performs these kind of quick secret eating rituals in order for that parent part of us, that critical part of us, to not see it. But of course, we can't hide from ourselves, and often we'll eat the things, we'll eat the chocolate, we'll eat the cake, and then that critical voice starts to come in. So secret eating holds a lot of shame, a lot of guilt, but also a lot of confusion, because often when we are eating from these like non-conscious parts of ourselves, we can often, when we sort of step back and we try to understand why we do that, it's really hard to understand it, because logically and consciously it makes no sense to eat in that way. There's times where I've been stood at the fridge and I'm eating something, and in my head I'm saying to myself, why am I doing this like secretively? Because Gary wouldn't care if I ate those foods. But equally, I know there have been times in the past where people have made comments, especially if I've been on a diet, and someone may have said to me, "Oh, should you be eating that?" And it's those kinds of comments that drive us into those secretive behaviours. But it's not just external people that say that to ourselves. We are constantly setting those rules for ourselves. So we are constantly wagging the finger and telling ourselves that we shouldn't have it, which then drives this kind of sneaky secretive behaviour. So if you can recognise those patterns in your own internal dialogue, you know, the parent voice that will say you're not allowed to have that, which is what diets encourage us to do, and then the inner child wanting that food, and the outer child, which is like the rebel and the saboteur, actually doing the secretive eating behaviour in a hope that they don't get seen. So, you know, moving forward, and how I work with clients when they are exhibiting these like sneaky secretive behaviours around food, the first one is moving away from denial and starting to be really honest about those behaviours that you perform. And something I often do is I'll get clients to actually choose one of the foods that they often eat quite secretively and start to openly eat it in front of people. Because another thing that sometimes happens, and I can remember this working with a client in the summertime, she would dish out ice creams to the rest of the family and she wouldn't have one, but she would then eat it in secret. And so I invited her to actually give herself permission to eat that ice cream with everybody else. And it was quite remarkable, that transition. You know, yes, she had to like work through that uncomfortable feeling of doing that and eating that in front of everybody, but actually what she felt was, instead of sitting there feeling like she was being left out, she actually felt connected and part of that treat that the family was having. So honesty is a really important part of overcoming secret eating. Also acceptance that it happens. You know, what we tend to do is we judge and label it, which kind of kicks off that guilt and shame cycle, and we kind of all know how that one plays out. So honesty, acceptance that that's where you're at the moment, because what we do by starting to accept things, it's not about saying it's okay and that like it happens more. What we do when we start to accept is we break that guilt and shame cycle, and what that does is it frees us up to actually start to work on the reasons why, because all the while we're experiencing guilt and shame, what tends to happen is we go into avoidance or we go into withdrawal. So starting to look at what kicks off that guilt and shame cycle is really important. So being honest with yourself, accepting that that's kind of just some of the behaviours you're engaging in at the moment, and then working on understanding what drives that secretive behaviour. And a therapy that I use a lot is called exposure therapy. The way in which we learn, the way in which we start to break down the beliefs and the rules that we've got around eating some of these foods is by exposing ourselves to situations like I invited my client to actually eat the ice cream in front of the family, you know, and yeah, it feels scary, but what we do is we predict what we think an outcome's going to be like. And if we're predicting that we're going to be frowned upon for eating the ice cream or judged in some way, you can see how we're not going to do it. And so just kind of stretching ourselves a little bit and exposing ourselves and putting ourselves in these situations where we start to eat more openly in front of people. So actually what we can start to do is change those stories, change those beliefs that eating in front of people are going to be a shaming experience. And the more you practice this is the same with most of the techniques that I share when I'm working with people and helping them to reject dieting mentality and move towards food freedom. It is about being brave and being curious and trying out these little experiments that actually start to change the stories that we've previously created around eating in front of people. So I wanted to just come on and share that. I want to do a few more videos in the group so you kind of get to see my chops a little bit more. So hopefully that's helpful, and yeah, see you all soon.